Have you ever wondered if the stories of Nazi soldiers chasing mystical relics in movies like Indiana Jones or Captain America had any truth behind them? What if those wild tales of secret rituals, pagan gods, and lost ancient weapons were not entirely fiction? During World War, one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, was not just a military leader. He was also a man consumed by the belief that ancient gods and forgotten civilizations held the key to ultimate power. Himmler's obsession went far beyond politics or war strategy. He dreamed of building a new faith, a Germanic religion that would replace Christianity and unite his followers under myths of ancient Aryan heroes, sacred runes, and cosmic forces. To him, legends like Thor's hammer were not just symbols of mythology, they were real. Ancient technologies, lost to time and waiting to be rediscovered. From secret castles and bizarre rituals to expeditions across the Himalayas, Himmler and his followers searched the world for proof that their race descended from divine warriors. They mixed science with superstition, myth with ideology, and in doing so, they blurred the line between fantasy and fanaticism. This is the story of how myth became a weapon, and how one man's fascination with the supernatural helped shape one of the darkest chapters in human history. If you enjoy exploring the hidden corners of history where truth, myth, and mystery collide, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us as we uncover the untold stories of World War I and beyond so that we can remember, understand, and never repeat the mistakes of the past. As Himmler's obsession with creating a new faith deepened, he began to see this not only as an elite military force but as the sacred core of a spiritual revolution. In this new order would rise above the old world of priests, churches, and moral restraint, reviving what he believed to be the pure spirit of the ancient Germanic tribes. Christianity, in his view, had weakened the German soul. He wanted something older, something rooted in blood, soil, and myth. Within this, Himmler sought to engineer this transformation through ritual. Every ceremony, from marriage to birth, was reshaped to reflect the values of his imagined Aryan faith. Gone were the crosses, prayers, and hymns of Christianity. In their place came torches, runes, and carefully choreographed performances that mixed military precision with mysticism. At weddings, couples stood beneath banners marked with black runes and the swastika, while officers read passages not from scripture, but from Mein Kampf. The words of Hitler became sacred text, recited as a declaration of faith in the nation and the so-called purity of the German bloodline. The newlyweds would light a single candle, symbolizing the birth of a new Aryan generation, a ritual meant to link love, race, and duty into one unbroken chain. Himmler did not stop there. He envisioned every child born into this family as a part of this grand spiritual renewal. Instead of baptism, there were naming ceremonies, held in rooms adorned with portraits of Hitler, SS emblems, and pagan symbols. A ceremonial dagger might be placed before the infant, not as a threat but as a token of heritage, a sign that the child belonged to the Brotherhood of the SS. Passages from Mein Kampf were sometimes read aloud, even sung, to welcome the newborn into the world with the ideology of loyalty and sacrifice. For Himmler, these children were more than the next generation. They were living proof of his myth made real, the future priests and warriors of his new faith. To ensure that this faith endured, Himmler turned ancient seasonal festivals into moments of devotion. The summer solstice became a sacred event, meant to celebrate fertility and the eternal cycle of life. SS officers and members of the National Socialist Women's League gathered around great bonfires, their ceremonies blending athletic displays, music, and speeches about destiny and rebirth. It was not merely a celebration but a ritual of creation, an orchestrated attempt to merge passion, ideology, and biology. Himmler believed that by linking these moments of life and love to the rhythms of nature. He could root his new religion in something primal and eternal. At its heart, this project was an experiment in control. By replacing faith with ideology and worship with obedience, Himmler aimed to mold human relationships themselves into instruments of his vision. Love was reduced to duty, marriage became a patriotic act, and even childbirth turned into a ritual of allegiance. Yet beneath all the symbolism and solemn gestures, there was a strange emptiness. The ceremonies were elaborate, but they lacked the warmth of belief, the comfort of genuine faith. Few within this truly shared Himmler's passion for these neo-pagan ideals. Most simply went through the motions, reciting the words and lighting the candles because it was expected. Still, for Himmler, these rituals were more than superstition. They were the foundation of a new world he believed he could build from the ashes of the old. Each ceremony, each symbol, was a step toward transforming myth into reality. In his imagination, the Ses would become not just the guardians of the Reach, but the priests of a new religion, one born not from compassion or grace, but from myth, power, and the illusion of destiny. Himmler's fascination with ancient myths and forbidden knowledge was not born overnight. It was the culmination of ideas that had been quietly growing in Germany long before the rise of the Nazi regime. In the early decades of the 20th century, a strange blend of nationalism and mysticism began to capture the imagination of many Germans who felt disillusioned by modernity and defeat in World War I. Secretive groups such as the Völkisch and Thule societies promised to restore lost pride by connecting the German people to an imagined lineage of ancient Aryan warriors. They mixed romantic notions of a heroic past with esoteric teachings about hidden bloodlines, cosmic energy, and forgotten gods who had once guided the destiny of Northern Europe. It was within this shadowy world of myth and symbolism that Heinrich Himmler found both inspiration and purpose. Among the mystics who influenced him most was Karl Maria Willigert, an eccentric figure who claimed to possess ancestral memories of a pre-Christian Germanic civilization that had once ruled the world through spiritual power and racial purity. To Himmler, these were not mere fantasies but revelations of a sacred history waiting to be reborn. He envisioned himself as the modern guardian of that lost tradition, a man chosen to lead the Aryan race back to its mythical origins. Christianity, with its foreign roots and emphasis on compassion, was viewed as an obstacle that had weakened the warrior spirit of his people. Instead, Himmler dreamed of reviving the faith of ancient tribes, one that worshipped strength, loyalty, and destiny. As his influence within the Nazi hierarchy grew, so too did his ambition to turn these mystical ideas into reality. He imagined this not only as a military elite, but as a spiritual brotherhood bound by blood, ritual, and sacred duty. To achieve this transformation, he began blending pseudo-scientific racial theories with neo-pagan symbolism, turning the Ses into a cult-like order that sought divine legitimacy through myth. Each member was encouraged to see himself as a descendant of the ancient Aryan conquerors, heirs to a divine mission that transcended ordinary politics. The swastika, runes, and other symbols borrowed from old Germanic legends were reimagined as emblems of spiritual rebirth. In Himmler's mind, this was not merely ideology, it was destiny. He believed that by reviving the pure pre-Christian faith, he could awaken the ancestral memory of the German people and forge an unbreakable unity rooted in shared myth. The old gods of thunder and earth were invoked as guardians of the new Reach, their supposed power harnessed to sanctify conquest and obedience. Behind the grand spectacles of parades and ceremonies lay a hidden theology, one that sought to merge mysticism with state control. It was a dangerous illusion, one that replaced faith with fanaticism, history with fantasy, and human empathy with the cold logic of racial myth. In this world of invented rituals and imagined pasts, Himmler saw himself not as a servant of politics but as a high priest of a new order, a man who could shape destiny through belief. It was this fusion of myth and authority that gave the its haunting identity. blending the pageantry of ancient legends with the ruthless machinery of modern power. By the time Himmler had fully embraced the vision of a neo-paganus, he recognized that to legitimize his mystical ideology, he needed tangible proof, something physical, something that could anchor myth in reality. This desire led him to Wewelsburg Castle, a centuries-old fortress perched near the Teutoburg forest, a site already steeped in Germanic legend. Himmler saw in the castle not just stone walls and battlements, but a sacred symbol of ancestral power, a place where the SS could be both a military elite and a spiritual brotherhood. He imagined the castle as the heart of a new order, where rituals, ceremonies, and symbols would converge to create an almost religious devotion among his followers. It was to be a living shrine to the Aryan past, a fortress where myth and ideology fused into a powerful narrative of destiny. To complement this symbolic stronghold, Himmler founded the Ahnenerbe, an organization tasked with uncovering proof of Aryan superiority through history, archaeology, and anthropology. The mission of the Ahnenerbe was grandiose and sprawling, sending expeditions to nearly every corner of the world in search of ancient relics, inscriptions, and evidence that could validate Himmler's vision. In Finland, researchers recorded the practices of local sorcerers, witches, and shamans, capturing their rituals on film and documenting what Himmler believed to be remnants of ancient Nordic traditions. In Italy, they scoured ruins for signs of Germanic influence, while in Greece, they searched for traces of a lost Aryan civilization that might have shaped classical culture. Even beyond Europe, the Ahnenerbe ventured to Iraq, Libya, and the remote heights of Tibet, carrying with them the hope that the past might justify the ideology of the present. Perhaps the most infamous of these journeys was the expedition to Tibet led by Ernst Schiffer, an SS officer and zoologist. Himmler was captivated by the idea that the highlands of Asia could hold the secrets of Aryan origins, and Schiffer's team meticulously recorded the features, skulls, and customs of the local populations. Anthropologists measured noses, skulls, and cheekbones, interpreting physical traits as markers of supposed Nordic ancestry, while photographers captured portraits that Himmler would later study as evidence of a hidden lineage. Every step of the journey was framed as a quest not just for knowledge, but for validation of the SS mystical and racial ambitions. Inside Wewelsburg itself, the rituals of the SS reached their full expression. Ceremonial halls were adorned with runes, the swastika, and portraits of dead members whose lives were transformed into symbols of loyalty and sacrifice. Honor rings, designed to commemorate fallen officers, were stored with the belief that their spirits could be invoked to guide the living, creating a bridge between history and myth. Himmler's vision was comprehensive. The castle, the Ahnenerbe, and the expeditions formed a single narrative, one that sought to rewrite history in service of ideology, turning legend into an instrument of power. Yet, despite the elaborate ceremonies, scientific measurements, and distant travels, the line between fact and fantasy remained blurred. The artifacts, the ruins, and even the landscapes of Tibet were interpreted through the lens of belief rather than objective inquiry, each discovery serving the narrative Himmler wanted to construct. In this way, Wewelsburg and the Ahnenerbe were not merely tools of historical research, they were instruments of imagination, transforming castles, mountains, and relics into a living mythology that fueled one of the most extreme ideological experiments of the 20th century. Amid the grand rituals at Wewelsburg and the far-reaching expeditions of the Ahnenerbe, Himmler's obsession with proving Aryan supremacy reached a fever pitch when he became fixated on the idea of Mjolnir, the legendary hammer of Thor. To Himmler, this was not merely a symbol from myth, a relic of old stories told around northern fires, but a weapon of unimaginable power, a technology lost to history that could grant the cess and, by extension, the reach and edge over the world. He imagined that the thunderbolt wielded by the god of storms was more than metaphor. It was a tangible, mechanical force, an early form of war-making, a divine instrument waiting to be rediscovered and harnessed in the modern age. Himmler's pursuit of the hammer was inseparable from his broader, pseudo-scientific worldview, shaped in part by eccentric theories like Hans Hubberger's Welt-Tiesler, or world ice theory, which posited that ice was the fundamental substance of the universe, governing cosmic evolution in ways invisible to ordinary understanding. In Himmler's mind, the study of ancient myths and obscure sciences was not contradiction but confirmation. If Thor's hammer could be understood and replicated, it would prove that the Aryans had once wielded a superior knowledge of the cosmos, one that could be reclaimed in the present. Expeditions that had ventured to Tibet, Finland, and across Europe were suddenly imbued with renewed urgency. Each archaeological dig, anthropological measurement, and excavation reinterpreted through the lens of this ultimate goal. Orders went out across the Ahnenerbe network. Locate every trace of lightning, every symbol of thunder, every story or artifact that could point to the lost knowledge of Thor. Himmler demanded that scholars, scientists, and officers dedicate themselves not just to cataloging relics, but to translating them into potential instruments of power. The boundary between myth and experiment blurred as manuscripts were analyzed, inscriptions measured, and ancient sites surveyed with the expectation that one day they might yield a device capable of striking with the force of the gods themselves. Even as the war escalated and resources became scarce, Himmler's fixation remained undiminished. He imagined laboratories where the principles of the past could be fused with contemporary technology to produce a weapon that could control the battlefield, disrupt communications, and intimidate enemies through sheer spectacle. Yet, behind the pseudo-scientific rigor and ritualized fervor lay a deeper psychological drive. Himmler was attempting to reconcile his mystical dreams with the harsh realities of war, to convert imagination into strategy, and myth into authority. The quest for Munjana became an emblem of the broadest project, a search for transcendence, legitimacy, and ultimate power. In rooms lined with runes and portraits, surrounded by the echoes of ceremonies and lectures, Himmler envisioned himself as the modern conduit for an ancient divine will, turning legend into a tool of domination. Each expedition brought stories of distant lands, of snow-capped mountains and hidden temples. But none could produce the hammer he sought. Yet he persisted, compelled by faith in his ideology and the intoxicating possibility that myth might yet be made real. In this relentless pursuit, the story of Müller exemplifies the strange convergence of obsession, a pseudo-science, and ideology that defined Himmler, a blend of ritual, imagination, and the desire for power so extreme that it transformed castles, mountains, and ancient symbols into instruments in a war not only against nations, but against the very boundaries of belief, knowledge, and reality. Despite the grandiose visions, elaborate ceremonies, and global expeditions, Himmler's dream of a neo-pagan rooted in ancient Aryan myth largely failed to take hold. Among the rank and file of the Thess, enthusiasm for his mystical ideals was lukewarm at best. Many officers and soldiers remained committed to their Christian upbringing, or simply indifferent to the elaborate rituals and pseudo-scientific theories that Himmler insisted would define the future of the German people. Even the carefully orchestrated solstice festivals, naming ceremonies, and Lebensborn programs could not manufacture genuine belief or devotion, revealing a fundamental flaw in Himmler's strategy. Ideology alone cannot substitute for faith, and myth cannot compel loyalty if it does not resonate with the human heart. Outside this, the German public largely ignored or quietly mocked these strange practices. While Himmler imagined that invoking Thor's hammer or resurrecting long-forgotten Aryan customs would galvanize the nation, the reality was far more mundane. Ordinary Germans continued with their daily lives, attending churches, raising families, and navigating the pressures of a wartime society without ever participating in the rituals that were meant to transform their culture. In essence, the elaborate mythology crafted by Himmler remained largely confined to his inner circle, a spectacle of ambition rather than a widespread spiritual revolution. Yet, in the decades that followed, post-war media, literature, and film would amplify this image of the Nazis as fanatical occultists. Tales of secret ceremonies, mystical weapons, and supernatural ambitions captured imaginations and became shortened for evil, creating a narrative that blurred the line between myth and reality. From comic books to blockbuster films, the image of the occult-obsessed Nazi became embedded in popular culture, cementing the idea that dark magic and esoteric rituals drove the horrors of the Third Reich. These portrayals, while entertaining, obscure a deeper and more unsettling truth. The true danger lay not in myth or superstition, but in ordinary people embracing hatred, fear, and conspiracy myths, allowing ideology to justify actions that should have been unimaginable. In reflecting on Himmler's ambitions, the lesson is clear. It is not the fantastical elements, the hammer of Thor, the secret castles, the pseudo-scientific expeditions that pose the greatest threat to humanity. Rather, it is the human capacity to accept lies, to follow authority without question, and to dehumanize others in the pursuit of imagined ideals. The story of Himmler and the S serves as a stark reminder that atrocities are not committed by monsters alone, but by people who are persuaded, through ideology and fear, that they are acting for a greater purpose. It is a cautionary tale about the power of belief, both rational and irrational, and the responsibility each of us holds to question, to reason, and to uphold human dignity. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of the darker, more mysterious corners of history. If you found this story compelling and want to explore more untold truths from the past, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. By staying curious and informed, we honor history and ensure that lessons from the past continue to guide us into the future.